I had still been receiving my husband's military allowance every month. But during a routine health checkup, I was blindsided by the truth. I had already been divorced for 6 months. I laughed in disbelief, my anger rising like fire. Then I turned around and immediately went to cancel the nursing home contract for my mother-in-law. That night, I took her, bedridden and frail, straight to the gate of my ex-husband's military base. The next morning, when Ethan Miller returned from registering his marriage with another woman named Sophia, he walked into the reception hall of the officer's compound to find me and his mother sitting there calmly as if we owned the place. "What are you doing here with my mother?" His face darkened instantly. I threw the freshly printed marriage certificate right at him, my tone ice cold. "You're married now, Ethan, so please fulfill your duty and take good care of your own mother." Sophia's face flushed red, then turned ghostly pale. Her fingers clenched the marriage certificate so tightly it looked like she might rip it apart. Watching the two of them, I felt nothing but deep, gratifying satisfaction. Next would come the military disciplinary review, followed by the medical expenses for his mother, more than enough to make both of them miserable for quite some time. The small-town clinic always smelled faintly of disinfectant mixed with dust. I sat on a hard wooden chair in the gynecology exam room, my fingers gripping the edge of my blouse, my palms slick with cold sweat. Out in the hallway, people came and went, footsteps echoing, someone coughing, a child crying. The sounds tangled into a dull, restless hum, but I barely heard any of it. I could only hear my heartbeat, fast and loud like drums before battle. I was waiting for my test results. The doctor had said my body was a little weak, my blood and energy low, that I needed proper rest and nutrition. I wondered, if I could get pregnant again, would Ethan be happy? He always said his unit was busy and that his career came first, that there was no need to rush about having another child. But we'd been married for almost 7 years now, and I was 28. If we kept waiting, I'd soon be considered an older mother, with higher risks. Maybe, if we had another baby, our home would finally feel more like a real family. Maybe Ethan would have a reason to come home more often. Just then, Dr. Emily Leighton, a young physician in a white coat and gold-rimmed glasses, pushed open the door. She held my medical report in her hand. I quickly stood up, forcing a polite smile. "That's me, doctor." She adjusted her glasses, her gaze sweeping across my face before dropping to the report in her hand. Her brows furrowed slightly. "You're married, right?" My heart skipped. Was there something seriously wrong? "Yes," I replied quickly. "My husband's a soldier. He's stationed away on duty." The confusion on her face deepened. She flipped the report over and pointed to the computer screen. "That's strange. If that's true, then why does the system show your marital status as divorced?" The word divorced hit me like a thunderclap out of a clear blue sky. My body went rigid, the blood draining from my veins. "No, that has to be a mistake," I said, my voice shaking. "Doctor, are you sure? My husband's name is Ethan Miller. He's an officer in the Army. We're doing just fine. How could we be divorced?" My words trembled, each one catching in my throat. Startled by my reaction, Dr. Leighton turned the screen toward me and spoke gently. "See for yourself. It's clearly recorded here. You and someone named Ethan Miller completed the divorce procedures 6 months ago." She double-checked the details. The names and ID numbers match perfectly. The date of signing was June 12th, 6 months ago. My heart felt as though it had been crushed by an invisible hand and thrown into a bottomless pit. I remembered that day clearly. It had been rare. Ethan had come home on leave. He told me his unit needed to update family records and that I just needed to sign a few forms. He handed me a stack of documents and pointed out where I should sign. I didn't think twice. I trusted him completely. Ethan's voice had been gentle that day, though there was a hint of impatience in it. "Lisa, sign it quickly. It's just some administrative paperwork. I have to return to the base tomorrow." At the time, I was busy wiping down my bedridden mother-in-law. My hands were covered in ointment, and I didn't even look up. I signed exactly where Ethan pointed, not checking a single page, not even hesitating. I trusted him completely, so completely that my faith in him had become part of my bones. He was a soldier, a man who served his country, the person I looked up to, the sky above my head. How could I, Lisa Harper, ever imagine that he would betray me? But now, thinking back, I realized that stack of papers I never once looked through, each and every page was a blade. And I had been the fool who handed him the hilt with my own hands. My whole body went cold, so weak I could barely stand. The thin sheet of the medical report in my hand suddenly felt as heavy as a boulder. Every printed word burned into my eyes like a red-hot needle. The words married had been crossed out in thick red ink, replaced with two glaring uppercase words: divorced. Humiliation and fury surged inside me like a tidal wave, drowning me in seconds. I stumbled out of the exam room, my ears ringing, the world tilting and spinning. I leaned against the cold wall in the hallway, struggling to breathe, and pulled out my old phone. I wanted to call Ethan. I wanted to scream, to demand what the hell had happened. But my fingers trembled above the call button and refused to press down. I was terrified that he would answer with the smooth, well-prepared lies he'd practiced 100 times. Or worse, that he would coldly admit everything. Suddenly, I remembered the bank card I always kept in my jacket pocket. It was the card where the military transferred the monthly allowance for soldiers' wives. I opened the banking app, and the glowing numbers on the screen nearly blinded me. The allowance for this month had been deposited just 3 days ago, every cent accounted for. He had divorced me 6 months ago, yet he was still collecting the spouse allowance in my name, as if nothing had ever changed. A harsh, broken laugh escaped my lips. Ha! Ha! I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor, laughing like a lunatic. The laughter shook out of me until tears streamed down my face. I, Lisa Harper, had spent years working myself to the bone, taking care of everything at home. I tended to his paralyzed parents, scrimped and saved every penny, all for the hope that Ethan might have a brighter future, that our small family might live a little better. And how did it all end? He had thrown me away like garbage. Not even a goodbye. Not even a single explanation. And I, fool that I was, had still been dreaming about having another child, thinking a baby might keep a husband whose heart had long since left me. My stomach twisted violently. I clamped a hand over my mouth and rushed to the restroom, retching until the world spun around me. What I vomited wasn't just bile, it was 7 years of humiliation, blood, and tears that I had swallowed in silence. Cold water splashed over my face, clearing my head just enough to think straight. No, I couldn't just let this go. Absolutely not. Like a ghost without direction, I staggered down the scorching summer road toward home. The sun blazed down, the weeds along the roadside wilted and lifeless, yet I felt no heat, only a deep chill spreading from my bones through my entire body. When I pushed the door open, a wave of stifling air hit me, the heavy mix of medicine and urine. Inside, Mrs. Vivian Miller, my mother-in-law, lay on the bed, moaning weakly. She'd had a stroke 6 months ago and was paralyzed on one side, her speech slurred, needing help with every little thing. I stared at the frail, aged woman on the bed, my heart hollow. Moving like a machine, I poured a glass of warm water and used a spoon to feed her, sip by sip. Her cloudy eyes looked at me, as though she wanted to say something, but all that came out were broken, muffled sounds. Before, I'd felt sorry for her, so I cared for her wholeheartedly, feeding her, changing her diapers, wiping her down without ever complaining. After all, Ethan was her only son, her last support, and I was his wife. Caring for my mother-in-law was simply my duty. But in this moment when I looked at her, there wasn't a trace of love or pity in my eyes. What did I, Lisa Harper, have left to rely on? What reason did I have to stay in this empty house, taking care of a bedridden woman while the man who'd promised to be my partner was off, starting a new life with his lover? I am no saint. The rage inside me grew like wild grass, out of control. I had to find out the truth with my own eyes. I had to see the proof. There is discipline in the military. This kind of thing can't be raised recklessly. I needed to start at the Civil Affairs office. I stopped by our neighbor Mrs. Zhang's to ask her to watch my mother-in-law for a bit, then grabbed the household registration book and my ID and caught a bus to the county seat. The administrative office was cool with the air conditioning blasting, but that chill didn't touch the ice inside me. I stood in line, my hands and feet cold as if I were already dead. When it was my turn, I handed the documents through the window and voice hoarse said, "Excuse me, I want to check my marital status." The clerk, maybe in her 30s, took the papers, typed a few lines, and looked up at me with a flicker of pity in her eyes. "You're Lisa Harper, right? According to the system, you and Ethan Miller completed divorce procedures on June 12th. The last remnant of hope I'd been clinging to shattered under those words. There was nothing left. "Can I see the divorce agreement?" I almost begged. She hesitated for a second, then opened the electronic file. The agreement flashed on the screen like a knife to my face. The contents were absurd, almost obscene. It said the relationship had broken down mutually, and that I voluntarily gave up all communal property and abandoned custody rights. At the bottom was my signature, wobbly, looped like a child's handwriting, nowhere near the neat script I always wrote. But the fingerprint smudges were bright red, and the ID numbers and seals were all genuine. Ethan had planned this carefully. With a forged signature, he had robbed me of everything. I stared at the screen, frozen, my whole body trembling with fury. The clerk, apparently to break the suffocating silence, blurted out, "Oh, by the way, funny timing. This morning your ex-husband Ethan registered his marriage to a woman." Her words detonated in my head like a bomb. This morning, on the very day we were legally divorced, he'd rushed to marry another woman, not even waiting a single day. I could picture him clearly. In uniform, his posture straight, face bright, standing beside a young, beautiful woman, smiling as they walked into this very office, into the room that declared the death of my 7-year marriage and the start of their new life. Meanwhile, I'd been foolishly clinging to the rear lines, tending to his bedridden parents and serving him. All the pain, humiliation, and hatred in me swelled like a tidal wave, and then burst into white-hot rage and absolute numbness. Ethan's cowardice, I remembered it now, and I clenched my fists so tight my fingernails bit into my palm until they bled, the sting bringing a sharp clarity. I walked out of the civil affairs office into the blazing sunlight. The world outside felt like it was trying to scorch my eyes, but inside me, there was only frost. I would not cry, and I would not make a scene. Tears were the most useless thing in the world. I wanted them to pay the highest price for what they had done to me. By the time I got home, it was nearly dark. The lights were off. Only the heavy breathing of my mother-in-law filled the house. Mrs. Vivian Miller's groans echoed low and muffled in the dark. I turned on the light and looked at the frail old woman lying on the bed, now completely cut off from the world. My thoughts tangled in chaos. I used to think she was pitiful, so I cared for her devotedly, feeding her, changing her, cleaning her, never uttering a word of complaint. After all, she was Ethan's mother, the last tie that bound me to this house. I thought caring for her was my duty, my way of protecting the family I had sacrificed my youth for. But now as I looked at her, all I felt was emptiness. What right did I, Lisa Harper, have to keep carrying this burden? What reason did I have to stay in this hollow house, serving a bedridden woman, while the man who once vowed to protect me was out there enjoying his new life with his mistress? I was no saint. The resentment inside me spread like wild weeds, growing out of control. My mother-in-law had once been the reason I endured every humiliation, but now she had become my only trump card, the sharpest weapon I had left to strike back at Ethan Miller. She was the last thing I could still gamble with. "I'm sorry, Mom," I whispered silently. "I'm not being cruel. It's your son who cut ties first." And in that moment, I made a decision that even I was shocked by, the kind of cold, precise decision that only comes when your heart has turned to ice. I walked over to the bed and began packing my mother-in-law's clothes and personal items. Then I called the private nursing home in town, the one where I used to send her during the days while I went to work. "Hello, is this Director Lee?" I said, keeping my voice steady. "This is Lisa Harper, the relative of Mrs. Vivian Miller." "Yes, I'd like to process her discharge papers. She's already back home with me, so I just need to complete the formalities." The woman on the other end sounded startled. "Lisa, why are you checking her out? Mrs. Miller's condition isn't stable. She needs professional care. Are you planning to take care of her yourself?" I knew better than anyone how hard it had been to get her admitted there. The cost wasn't cheap, but I'd had no other choice. I had to work during the day, so I left her there and brought her home at night. I answered calmly, my tone completely flat. "That won't be necessary anymore, Director. She has her son to take care of her now. It's no longer my responsibility. Without another word, I hung up. Then I paid for a van and driver. It took all my strength to lift Mrs. Miller, along with her simple hospital bed, into the vehicle. The van rattled over the potholes on the country road. My mother-in-law drifted in and out of consciousness, groaning softly in discomfort. I glanced at her face reflected in the mirror. For a brief second, guilt and pity flickered through me, but they vanished just as quickly, crushed beneath the icy determination in my chest. I took out my phone and typed a message to Ethan. Ethan Miller, I have a wedding gift for you and your new wife. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., in the reception room of the officer's compound. Be there. I knew tonight was their wedding night. He wouldn't bother to check his phone. That was fine. The message wasn't for him to answer. It was an invitation. A ticket to the grand play that was about to begin. I powered off my phone and leaned my head against the cold window, watching the world blur past. In the distance, the city lights shimmered like a distant dream, so bright, so unreachable. Once I had dreamed of that too, a small apartment in the city, a warm dinner, laughter echoing between me and Ethan, but that dream was gone. I was no longer the woman who spent her days between the kitchen stove and the sickbed. No longer the Lisa Harper who endured, who gave everything for her husband and his family. Starting today, I would live for myself. I would reclaim the youth that had been stolen from me, the dignity that had been trampled, the justice that I deserved, even if I had to earn it through pain. By the time dawn broke, pale gray light filtered through the van's window, brushing against my sleepless face. The vehicle came to a stop at the gates of the officer's compound. The gate of Ethan Miller's base stood tall and solemn, the red flag fluttering proudly overhead. The sentries stood at attention, their bearings strict and unapproachable. I paid the driver, and together we struggled to lift my mother-in-law, along with her simple hospital bed, out of the van and push it straight to the guard post. A guard immediately stepped forward, alert. "Ma'am, what is your business here?" His sharp eyes sized me up from head to toe, then swept over the motionless figure on the bed. I pulled my ID and the military spouse card from my pocket, the card long expired, and handed them to him. "Hello, I'm Lisa Harper. I'm here to see Lieutenant Ethan Miller. I'm family. It's urgent." When I said the word family, I heard a trace of mockery in my own voice. The guard checked the papers, glanced at my mother-in-law who was barely breathing, and his face showed obvious awkwardness. "You say you're family, ma'am, but he just registered his marriage this morning and is on newlywed leave." I smiled coldly inside, just as I'd expected. I feigned surprise and urgency. "Married? How could that be? You have to meet him. This is his mother. Something serious happened at home. I can't handle it alone. He must come back." Perhaps my performance, plus the sight of his ailing mother, was convincing. The guard didn't hesitate and immediately called up the chain. About 20 minutes later, they allowed me inside to wait in the reception room. The room was clean and bright, the walls hung with a bold red slogan declaring service to the people. I rolled my mother-in-law's bed into the center of the room, the most conspicuous spot, and pulled a chair to sit beside it, waiting silently. I was waiting for my ex-husband and his newlywed wife. Exactly at 9, the reception doors were pushed open. Ethan walked in, crisp in uniform, his insignia gleaming in the morning light. Tall and handsome, he carried himself like a military hero, radiant as if surrounded by an aura. Beside him, arm-linked affectionately, was a young, beautiful woman in a dazzling red dress, her makeup perfect and her face glowing with happiness, Sophia. They walked in smiling and whispering, their happiness obvious. The sight hit me like a knife, but within seconds of their eyes dropping and seeing me and the bed behind me, their laughter froze. The joy on their faces hardened, especially Ethan's. In an instant, his expression shifted from smug contentment to cold as iron. He almost ground his teeth, each word rasping from between his jaws as he strode up to me and lowered his voice, full of barely contained fury and shame. "Are you crazy? What are you doing bringing my mother here?" he demanded. I lifted my head to meet his blazing gaze, my face calm, a cold smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into the canvas bag I'd brought, pulled out a paper, and slammed it down on the table in front of him. It was a blinding red marriage certificate, his photo and the woman's photo, Sophia, on it. "Ethan Miller, you're married. Congratulations, I said, each word clear and icy. Now, as his son, I invite you to fulfill your filial duty and care for your biological mother. Ethan's pupils constricted sharply. He looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. Sophia leaned down to read the name and photo on the paper. Her face flushed, and then drained of color so violently it was almost pathetic. The hand resting on Ethan's arm tightened instinctively. Ethan snatched the paper up as if to crush it, growling and staring at me with a look full of threat and warning. His voice dropped lower, a snarl like a cornered beast. What exactly do you think you're doing? Want to know what I'm doing? I slowly stood up and looked him straight in the eye. All the humiliation, anger, and bitterness that had built up over time finally found a way out in that moment. I should be the one asking what you were doing, Ethan. You secretly filed for divorce behind my back and then turned around and married someone else. What exactly did you take me for? What did you take this family for? My voice wasn't loud, but each word hit like a hammer, slamming straight into their hearts. You've been collecting your military spousal allowance every month, money issued under the name of your wife, Lisa Harper, while treating me as if I were already dead. You left your paralyzed mother, who can't even care for herself, for your ex-wife to look after like she was some piece of trash you threw away. And now that you're married and holding your beautiful new bride in your arms, shouldn't you be taking your mother home so your new wife can fulfill your filial duty for you? The moment I finished, Sophia exploded. What did she just say? Divorce? Allowance? Her voice cracked, her once beautiful face twisting with shock and rage. Her eyes darted over my plain, worn clothes, then to the frail old woman lying on the hospital bed, surrounded by the sour smell of medicine and age, before locking sharply onto Ethan. In that instant, she understood everything. She had thought she was marrying a promising young officer, a man of honor. But now she realized he was nothing more than a heartless coward who had abandoned his wife and neglected his own mother. Sophia's hand, clutching the photocopy of the marriage certificate, turned white at the knuckles. Her whole body trembled with fury. I could see the crack forming right there between them, the fracture spreading fast. Watching the two of them panic, embarrassed and ugly in their guilt, filled me with a sick sort of satisfaction, a vengeance so sharp it bordered on madness. Ethan Miller. Sophia. This was only the opening act. There was much more waiting for both of you. The air in the reception room dropped to a freezing chill after my words. Ethan's face shifted between pale and livid. The veins on his forehead stood out, ready to burst. He looked seconds away from exploding, but this was a military base. Eyes and ears were everywhere. He couldn't afford to lose control. All he could do was glare at me, eyes burning with the desire to tear me apart. Sophia, meanwhile, had lost all pretense of grace or poise. Clutching Ethan's arm tightly, she shook it hard and demanded, "Ethan, explain this to me right now. Who is this woman? And who's that old lady?" Her tone was dripping with contempt and disgust. This woman, that old lady. Every word cut with disdain, and she didn't even try to hide it. I stared at her coldly. This pampered city girl had probably never imagined that her true love would come packaged with a bedridden mother and a discarded wife. Our argument had reached such a pitch that it finally drew the attention of the base leadership. The man who entered was a major, 2 bars, 2 stars on his shoulder. His nameplate read Major Lee, the political officer of the unit. 2 young officers followed behind him. "What's going on here? Why is there such a commotion in the reception room?" Major Lee's tone was stern and sharp. Ethan, spotting his superior, looked as if he'd just grabbed a lifeline. He quickly stepped forward, raised his hand in salute, and said, "Reporting, Comrade Lee, this is just a personal family issue, a misunderstanding. I'll take care of it right away." He kept his tone low and steady, pretending nothing was serious. A misunderstanding. I almost laughed. Even now, he was still trying to cover it up. Before he could spin another lie, I stepped forward and calmly placed the documents I had prepared on the table before Major Lee. "Good morning, Comrade Lee. I'm Lisa Harper, Ethan Miller's ex-wife." I opened the folder and laid out the papers in order. Our divorce certificate, dated 6 months ago, a copy of Ethan's brand new marriage registration with Sophia, and finally, my mother-in-law's medical records and diagnosis report. This, I said evenly. Is the divorce certificate between Ethan and me, filed 6 months ago, though I was never informed. This is his marriage certificate from this morning. And these are the hospital files for his mother, Mrs. Vivian Miller, paralyzed and unable to care for herself. I lifted my gaze, meeting Major Lee's eyes steadily. I didn't come here to make trouble, I said, my voice calm but firm. I just want to ask 3 questions. The first one, during the period when our marriage was still legally valid. Did he have an affair with someone else? He tricked me into signing a divorce and then married another woman the next day. Doesn't that violate military discipline and an officer's ethics? I asked. Second, after the divorce, he continued to use my name to receive the military spouse allowance. Doesn't that count as fraud or misconduct? Third, he is the biological son who abandoned his paralyzed mother and dumped all responsibility onto his ex-wife. Does that fit the character of a soldier? Each question I voiced was like a hammer striking the list of Ethan Miller's offenses. Major Lee and the 2 officers behind him studied the documents. Their faces grew heavier, their brows knitting tighter. Ethan's color drained into ash, his lips trembled, and he couldn't form a word. Perhaps he had never imagined that the gentle, sheep-like woman before him could stand so coldly and methodically pin him to a post of shame. Sophia was stunned as well. She tried to interrupt, accusing me of jealousy and alleging I was fabricating the story to ruin their wedding, but Major Lee merely glanced at her with icy composure. Comrade, please remain silent. The unit has rules. We will investigate thoroughly, he said, his stern look silencing Sophia instantly. Her face flushed, but she dared not speak further. Major Lee ordered an officer to take Ethan to the next room for a private interview, then turned to me with a softer tone. Comrade Lisa Harper, we take your report very seriously. Please trust the organization. We will investigate and handle this fairly and rigorously. He then looked toward Mrs. Vivian Miller on the sickbed. As for the elderly woman, we will temporarily admit her to the unit medical room so the military medical staff can examine and care for her. Rest assured. A heavy stone in my chest dropped by half. I breathed. Thank you, Comrade Lee. I have one request. Ethan must bear all costs for his mother's treatment and nursing home care. I ask the unit to supervise to protect my lawful rights. It is his legal and moral obligation. We will do that, Major Lee said solemnly. Not long after, the military medics carefully wheeled my mother-in-law's bed away. Ethan was led off. Sophia stomped her foot in fury but could do nothing. A lightness rose in me. My first meaningful move had finally been made. I had acted correctly. Ethan and Sophia, your celebration is over. Word that Ethan had been suspended pending investigation spread through the base like wind. The once admired young officer, the promising young man others envied, had in an instant become the center of whispers, the protagonist of an ethical scandal. He was confined to the office again and again to write statements, facing stern criticism from his superiors and cold questions from the disciplinary committee. He felt pressure and fear. The career he had once proudly walked now lay under a thick shadow. When Ethan, exhausted, returned to the bridal chamber where Sophia waited, he did not find the tender care of a new wife but her screaming and scolding. Ethan Miller, you liar. You deceived me. Sophia grabbed pillows, cushions, anything at hand, and hurled them at him. You said you divorced without children, that your family was simple. What happened? Your ex-wife dragged your paralyzed mother here. How can I show my face? The whole base laughs at me, says I'm blind to marry an ungrateful, disloyal man. Her cries and wails cut sharp. Her carefully applied makeup streaked down her face, her features contorted with rage. Only now did she realize she had not married a promising stock, but plunged headfirst into a blazing pit. The glamorous dream of being an officer's wife hadn't even begun before it turned into a filthy, chaotic mess. What Sophia couldn't bear most was the thought that from now on, she would have to shoulder the burden of a half-paralyzed mother-in-law who couldn't care for herself. Ethan was nearly driven mad by her furious shouting. He tried to pull her into his arms and coax her. Sophia, listen to me, it's not what you think. Lisa Harper is just a rough, vindictive woman from the countryside. She came here deliberately to cause trouble because she can't stand to see me doing well. Don't touch me. Sophia shoved him away, disgust written all over her face. I don't care who she is. The problem now is your mother. What are you going to do? Are you going to let her stay in the base infirmary forever? When exactly are you planning to deal with this mess you've made? Ethan fell silent, speechless. A desperate, absurd thought flashed through his mind, asking me to take his mother back. But the moment he voiced it, Sophia immediately and viciously refused, and what followed was an even louder, nastier argument. Their wedding night ended in curses, shouting, and mutual blame. Meanwhile, I was staying temporarily in the guest house arranged by the unit. The room was clean with hot water and a private bathroom, far better than the old house back in the village. Every day, a liaison officer came to update me on the progress of the investigation and on Mrs. Vivian Miller's health condition. I behaved with humility and cooperation, never prying or stirring up trouble. All I had to do was wait for the results of the investigation. I knew the unit would eventually audit Ethan's finances. And indeed, within 2 days, Major Lee himself came to see me. He asked detailed questions about our household income and expenses during the marriage. I handed him a small notebook, filled with cramped handwriting, every single expense carefully recorded. It showed how I had stretched Ethan's modest salary and my own monthly allowance to keep the household running, pay for his mother's medical care, and even save a little to send money to him when he was stationed away. I also told Major Lee how Ethan had often borrowed money from me under various pretenses, claiming it was for entertaining superiors, for work-related studies, or for maintaining social ties. Each time he took tens of thousands, money I had saved by scrimping on food and clothing, sometimes even borrowing from my own parents. Back then, I had believed him wholeheartedly. I thought it was all for our future. But now, looking back, I knew exactly where all that money had gone, to Sophia. As for her, after her argument with Ethan, Sophia came looking for me at the guest house. She had shed her earlier arrogance, but still carried herself with the condescending air of someone used to getting her way. "Lisa Harper," she said coolly, "name your price. How much do you want to withdraw your complaint and take his mother back home?" She thought I was just a poor country woman who could be silenced with a handful of cash. I couldn't help but laugh. "Sophia," I said coldly, "do you think everything in this world can be bought? My dignity, the 7 years of my youth that were stolen from me, how much do you think that's worth? Go ahead, calculate it for Ethan." Her lips tightened. She was speechless for a moment before snapping. "Don't get greedy. If you push me, I'll ruin your name. I can make sure you'll never be able to lift your head again." I smiled faintly. "Go ahead, I have nothing left to lose. But you do, Miss Sophia. Think about it, what exactly do you gain from marrying a liar like him?" Sophia's face turned pale with fury. She stomped her foot, trembling with anger, and stormed out. Through a few old acquaintances, I soon heard that the scandal between Ethan and Sophia had already spread throughout the base. They'd become the laughingstock of everyone's gossip. The image of the model young officer Ethan Miller had spent years building was shattered overnight. Their marriage, crushed under the weight of debt and responsibility, was already cracking apart. Everything was going exactly as I'd planned. All it needed was one more spark. The unit's investigation team worked quickly. Just a few days later, they sent people to my hometown and Ethan's, a small, remote village. The news spread through the quiet place like a stone tossed into still water, sending waves through what had always been a peaceful little community. Ethan had once been the pride of that village, the phoenix that flew beyond the bamboo hedges, the golden example every parent used to scold their own children. And I, his wife, had basked in that reflected glory for years. But now, when the investigators began questioning the village chief and our neighbors, the tide of public opinion shifted completely to my side. "Lisa has suffered more than anyone realizes," the villagers murmured. "From the day she married Ethan, has she had a single day of peace? His mother's been bedridden for years. Lisa alone handled every meal, every diaper, every wash. Even a biological daughter wouldn't have been so devoted. Ethan? He's gone most of the year. When he comes home, he acts like a lord, won't even set up an oil lamp himself." Their whispers were like knives, stripping away the false halo Ethan had wrapped around himself. They recounted how frugally I had saved, how devotedly I'd cared for his family, how I had borne the weight of that bustling household alone. Each plain, heartfelt word became a clear, powerful indictment against him. The investigators wrote everything down carefully. They also uncovered that, besides neglecting his wife and mother, Ethan had repeatedly borrowed money from me, even from relatives in the village, under countless excuses: unit duties, training, networking, but never repaid a cent. When the team verified this with me, I gave them a new lead. I remembered that about a year earlier, Ethan had asked me to use my ID to open a new bank account. He had me receive transfers of unknown origin, sometimes a few million, sometimes tens of millions of dong, and then instructed me to send the money to his private account. When I'd asked about it back then, he'd brushed it off as project funds that couldn't go through his name. I had believed him. Now, looking back, it was clearly suspicious. I reported everything honestly. From that moment, the investigation officially shifted focus from mere personal misconduct to possible financial fraud. The nature of the case changed completely, and the pressure within the unit crashed down on Ethan like never before. He began to panic, scrambling for ways to pull strings, hoping to soften the blow. But he underestimated the army's resolve to clean house. I heard that Sophia's family had some influence in the city, but under military discipline, that meant nothing. The relationship between her and Ethan grew ever more strained as she slowly realized she hadn't just married a cheater. She might have married an economic criminal. Her glamorous dream of being an officer's wife had collapsed into a nightmare. The investigation team also summoned Sophia and her parents. When her parents learned their daughter had married an incompetent, corrupt man who might even be facing prison, their attitude changed instantly. They began pressuring Sophia to sever ties with Ethan at once, to avoid being dragged down with him. From the guest house lounge window, I could see the training field, where soldiers drilled under the blazing sun. A strange calm settled over me. For the first time in years, I felt free. I began seriously thinking about my future. When this was over, I would no longer be anyone's shadow. I would live for no one else, and I would no longer be chained to anyone's fate. From now on, my life would be mine to decide. As the investigation dug deeper, layer by layer, the mask of the model soldier Ethan Miller had built was torn away without mercy. The image of the exemplary officer he had worked so hard to craft crumbled piece by piece, leaving only smallness, selfishness, and disgrace. And I knew the day he would be punished was right before my eyes. The final judgment came faster and more completely than I had dared hope. After more than a week of thorough investigation, the unit's disciplinary committee issued a public decision against Ethan Miller. That day, the entire base was assembled for a discipline education session. I wasn't allowed to attend, but that very afternoon, Major Lee came to the guest house himself to deliver the results to me. Major Lee told me that morning the entire officer corps and soldiers of the base had assembled. The political committee and the disciplinary board had stood and read aloud the decision against Ethan Miller. That decision listed every charge clearly: deceiving the organization, using improper means to process a divorce, moral corruption and adultery during marriage, deception and misappropriation, exploiting the title of a married soldier to illegally obtain allowances, shirking family responsibilities, and willfully evading the duty to care for his biological mother, financial misconduct, and taking funds of unknown origin through his position. Each charge was a hammer blow, smashing the proud career Ethan had once boasted about, reducing it to rubble. The final verdict stripped him of all positions, expelled him from the army, and ordered that every improper allowance he had received be recovered. The evidence of financial misconduct would be handed to local judicial authorities for prosecution. For a man who had once held the honor of a soldier above his own life, expulsion from the military was nothing short of a death sentence. Major Lee said that when the sentence was announced, Ethan stood on the podium. The man once hailed as a model officer, with a face as pale as paper, his legs trembling so hard he nearly collapsed. Colleagues and comrades who had admired him now looked at him with contempt, regret, and coldness. Those eyes cut the last shreds of dignity from him like knives. Sophia was there too, seated in the front row in her official capacity as his new wife. As each charge was read, her face turned white, as if her soul had left her body. She trembled all over, Only then did she truly understand the man she had just married, how rotten he really was. Her dream of becoming an officer's wife, rising into the upper class, shattered into ashes. After the meeting, people said Sophia went mad, rushing at Ethan, hitting him, screaming and sobbing, calling him a fraud who had ruined her life. Their ridiculous marriage, which had lasted only days, collapsed in the most humiliating and tragic way. As for Mrs. Vivian Miller, the unit had issued a clear ruling. Ethan would be required to pay all her medical and nursing costs, with the money deducted directly from his severance allowance under unit supervision. When Major Lee informed me, I didn't feel the rush of joy I had imagined. What I felt instead was a deep, steady calm, like someone finally breaking free of chains after so many years. I took a deep breath. "Thank you," I said quietly. "Thank you for giving me justice." Major Lee looked at me, and there was genuine respect in his eyes. "Comrade Lisa Harper, you've endured far too much. You are a strong, resilient woman. What you've done is a lesson, a warning to all soldiers and their families." That afternoon, Sophia's family rushed in from the city. Without a word, they dragged her away, publicly declaring the annulment of her marriage and cutting all ties with Ethan. And so, in a single day, Ethan Miller, the man who had once strutted so proudly, lost everything: his career, his reputation, his love, his family. I stood at the guest house window, looking down at the courtyard. The two people, who had been newlyweds just days before, were now fighting and cursing, pulling at each other like enemies. I smiled faintly. In my ears I could almost hear again the words I had once spoken coldly in the base's reception room. "You're married now," I had told him. "So take responsibility for your own mother." And now his wedding gift had been delivered in full. I hoped he and Sophia enjoyed it. The news of Ethan Miller's expulsion from the army reached my village quickly. Exploding like a beehive struck open. The man who had once been its pride, the shining example parents held up for their children, had become a laughingstock, a modern-day cautionary tale spat upon by everyone. The gossip was no longer admiration or envy but contempt, bitterness, and even glee. "You can't judge a man by his uniform," they said. "We thought he was honorable. He turned out to be filth. Poor Lisa, all those years of silent suffering, and he pushed her into the mud. It's karma. Anyone unfilial and unfaithful meets a bad end." They say that city mistress of his bolted the moment he lost his value. When I finally arranged everything and returned to the village, what greeted me were no longer the pitying looks and whispered judgments of before. Instead, there were warm glances, genuine concern, and calloused hands reaching for mine. "Lisa, you're back. That's good. If you need help, come to me. What you did was wise. People like that deserve to be ruined." Looking at their plain, sincere faces, my eyes stung. I was no longer the silent, submissive woman letting others decide my fate. I had acted for myself, reclaimed my dignity, and taken back everything they owed me. For the first time in years, I stood straight. A few days later, Ethan returned to the village alone. His hair was a mess, his face haggard. He looked like a stray dog thrown out of its home. The man who had once strutted back in full uniform to honor his ancestors now slunk through the alleys, head down, unable to meet anyone's gaze. He locked himself inside the old house, refusing to step out even once, hiding from the villagers' contemptuous eyes and cutting whispers. Sophia quickly finalized the divorce. I heard that the Tew family, wanting to cut all ties, voluntarily paid a large sum to erase that ridiculous marriage of less than 2 weeks. Ethan had tried to cling to her, to beg, even to threaten with dirty tricks, but Sophia's blind love had turned into loathing and disgust. She left without a backward glance. As for me, with the unit's support, I officially contacted the county lawyer to begin handling the remaining financial matters between Ethan and me. Every cent he had borrowed or swindled had to be returned. The issue of supporting and caring for Mrs. Vivian Miller, his biological mother, also had to be put under clear legal supervision. After paying fines and returning the military allowances, Ethan's severance money was almost gone. He had no property in his name. To scrape together cash, he began selling off old household items of any value. But it was like a drop in the ocean compared to the cost of his mother's long-term care and treatment. Mrs. Vivian Miller had been transferred to the county's best rehabilitation and nursing center, thanks to special support from the unit. Ethan was now bound by both legal and military orders. He had to visit her regularly, pay the monthly care fees, and fulfill his duty to his mother. I went to visit her once. She lay on a clean bed. Her living conditions had improved noticeably, but her eyes were still empty and unfocused. The nurse told me Ethan had once come and knelt by her bedside, sobbing, but she hadn't reacted at all. Perhaps in her heart that son had died long ago. I watched it all, piece by piece, the fragments of a man I had once loved with all my heart, now stripped bare to the bone. He had fallen into the pit he dug for himself, abandoned and buried alive by his own past. I felt no pity for him. None at all, because everything happening to him was simply the consequence of his own actions. He had destroyed his life with his own hands. As for me, I was free. I was no longer his wife, no longer his family, no longer burdened. Everything was finally ending. I had thought it would stop there, but I underestimated how vicious a human heart could be. After divorcing Ethan Miller, Sophia discovered that not only had she gained nothing, but her reputation in her own circles had been ruined by that filthy, ridiculous marriage. She couldn't accept it. She didn't retreat quietly. She dumped all her resentment onto me. She began to play dirty, anonymously posting on social media and local forums, fabricating stories about me. She painted me as a scheming, greedy country woman with no bottom line. She claimed I had known Ethan was planning to divorce me and had deliberately kept his mother as a hostage to blackmail him. She claimed I had extorted money from Ethan and had caused his disciplinary punishment. She even said that my entire counterattack had been a calculated plot to swindle money. These lies, paired with doctored images, spread quickly, stirring up gossip among people who didn't know the truth. A few distant relatives of mine even saw them and called to ask. Before I could respond, Mrs. Zhang, the neighbor, stormed into my yard, phone in hand, fuming. "Lisa, look at this. What kind of black-hearted person is making up this garbage?" I looked at the black and white words on the screen and the filthy comments beneath them. Instead of anger, I laughed. "Sophia, you think the internet is your last weapon? You've underestimated me." Right in front of Mrs. Zhang, I took out my phone and called Mr. Wang, the chairman of the village committee. "Hello, Mr. Wang. This is Lisa Harper. I'd like to borrow the village loudspeaker for a while. There are some things I need to clarify for everyone." Half an hour later, the village loudspeaker blared. I stood in the committee office with my prepared script, speaking into the microphone in the calmest tone I could muster, recounting the entire story from beginning to end, clearly and in detail. Then I read aloud the official disciplinary decision, complete with the unit's bright red seal, word for word without leaving out a single sentence. When I finished, I posted a copy of the decision on the bulletin board outside the committee office, in the most visible spot, black on white, the official red seal, ironclad evidence. All the rumors shrank into something pitiful and absurd in front of official documentation. The loudspeaker carried the truth into every corner of the village, and the village's WeChat group exploded. People defended me and cursed the ones spreading lies. Sophia's vicious counterattack hadn't touched me. It had backfired like a slap across her own face, and Ethan's, sending their reputation in the village crashing to rock bottom. But I wasn't done. I consulted my lawyer again. He told me that the military spouse allowance Ethan had fraudulently received in my name was something I had every right to reclaim. He also said I could sue him for fraudulent divorce and adultery during marriage to claim damages for emotional distress. I didn't hesitate for a second. I immediately filed a petition with supporting evidence, sending it both to the unit and the court. I wanted him to understand that what he owed me, down to the last cent, he would repay. When the news reached Ethan, he completely panicked. He was already penniless, still carrying the burden of his mother's nursing costs. Where would he find the money to pay me back? He hadn't even paid me back yet. But people were already messaging me, asking me to be the bigger person, to go easy on him, to spare him for the sake of the past. I read those words and felt nothing but disgust. When he tricked me into signing those divorce papers, when he ran off to live comfortably with another woman, did he remember our so-called past then? I sent my reply through someone else. "We'll meet in court." The kindness and restraint I'd once shown him, he had mistaken it for weakness, for submission. With people like him, there was only one way to make them understand: use the sharpest blade possible. Make him hurt. Make him afraid. Make him remember for the rest of his life. When life had finally stripped away every layer of the past and settled every debt, emotional and otherwise, a new chapter truly began. With the back payments I recovered, along with humanitarian assistance from the unit, I rented a small, long-abandoned house at the edge of the village. I cleaned and repainted it until it was neat and welcoming, then opened a little restaurant. I named it simply Lisa's Kitchen. I poured all my years of cooking experience into it: fragrant oil-mixed noodles, rich minced pork dishes, plump steamed buns filled to the brim, hearty broths, along with pickled and braised sides. Everything was fresh, fairly priced, and full of flavor. The restaurant quickly became popular not just in my village, but in nearby towns as well. Every morning I rose before dawn to knead dough and prepare ingredients. The busyness left me no time to dwell on the past. Seeing customers eat happily and praise my food, "Miss Lisa, your cooking's amazing," filled me with a warmth and peace I had never known. I began saving up for driving lessons. The first time I got behind the wheel of an old pickup truck to restock ingredients from the county market, I looked down at my rough, calloused hands gripping the steering wheel and suddenly felt tears sting my eyes. From now on, I didn't need to rely on anyone. I didn't need to watch anyone's mood or live for anyone else. I was the one steering my own life. The young people in the village, seeing my business thrive, taught me how to live stream and sell food online. I picked it up fast, started offering local specialties and packaged dishes I made myself, and to my surprise, they sold like crazy. My life grew busier, fuller, and more colorful. The smile on my face came more easily now, and it was real. I was no longer the soldier's wife, Lisa Harper, the timid, self-effacing woman I used to be. The woman I had become shone with confidence. Every month, I still made a trip to the nursing home to visit my former mother-in-law, Mrs. Vivian Miller. I'd bring her some of her favorite dishes, wipe her face and hands, sit beside her, and chat softly. She couldn't respond, but that didn't matter. I didn't do it for Ethan, nor out of duty. I did it to keep the last bit of kindness in my own heart. Sometimes I still heard bits of news about Ethan and Sophia. After his expulsion, Ethan had no steady income and mounting debts. He drifted from place to place, beaten down by life, literally. Rumor had it that a debt collector broke his leg, and now he scraped by doing menial work on construction sites. The monthly nursing home payments deducted from his stipend weighed on him like a mountain. As for Sophia, the woman who once called herself a sophisticated city lady, after losing her reputation, she fell into hardship. She ended up marrying a man 20 years older than her, living with his children from a previous marriage amid constant conflict. From glamorous to bitter, from elegant to worn, it was all the price she had to pay. I felt nothing anymore. Their story no longer had anything to do with me. I was living my own life now, and it was getting better every day. One afternoon, I received a letter from Ethan's old military unit. Inside was a detailed statement of Mrs. Vivian Miller's nursing home expenses. Every line item was listed clearly and in order. Holding the paper in my hands, I felt a deep sense of reassurance. This was the guarantee I had fought for and won myself. 2 years later, Lisa's Kitchen was no longer just a little roadside eatery at the edge of the village. I rented a storefront in the busiest part of town and opened a bright, cozy restaurant. I registered the brand, launched a franchise system, and became one of the leading entrepreneurs in the county. I bought a house in town so my parents could enjoy their old age. I even set up a small scholarship fund for poor but hardworking kids in my village. For my former mother-in-law, besides what Ethan paid, I personally hired extra caregivers to make sure she was treated with dignity, not for anyone else's sake, but simply because I wanted to live with peace in my own heart. I heard Ethan once thought about coming back to the village to see me, but when he saw me driving my car, dressed neatly, confidently directing my staff, he didn't dare approach. We had become two entirely different worlds. Sophia's life grew only more miserable. One mild afternoon, I received a letter of thanks from Ethan's old unit. In it, the leadership acknowledged the years I had spent as a soldier's wife, dedicating myself to my family, and expressed respect for my courage in fighting to protect justice. Sunlight streamed through the window into my restaurant, casting a warm glow. I looked at my happy customers, my busy staff, and felt a calm, satisfied smile spread across my face. After all the storms, my life had finally welcomed the sunlight. The life of Lisa Harper had truly begun.